Hey everybody, it's Jay here. This is take 3 of this video because my dog needs to go outside to pee and stuff. So I have been trying to take care of him because my parents are out. But today I'm going to be talking about, I'm late to this party, the Drop the T campaign and should the trans community be separate from the LGBT plus community. So I am going to state the arguments that I've seen for both sides, and I feel like I can understand points on both sides of the argument, but that my opinion on it is quite firm, at least at the moment. I do think that my opinion on this kind of topic could change depending on what happens. Most important thing that I think about this is that trans people should be the people deciding something like this. It should be general consensus of the trans community as to whether the trans community splits away from the LGBT community. I firmly believe that, because the Drop the T campaign, if you didn't know, was a petition set up online to basically kick trans people out of the LGBT community, and it was set up by cis LGBT people. And I don't think that that's okay. I don't think it's okay for cis people to try and kick trans people out of a community that they have been rightfully in for quite a long time. Anyone who tries to tell you that trans people haven't always been part of like the LGBT community, like for such a long time we just called it the gay community and didn't even acknowledge like lesbians or bisexuals. We still don't acknowledge like pansexual, asexual stuff in the acronym. So like, I think it's fairly safe to say that that kind of argument is quite flimsy due to the way that people have erased identities over time. But first of all, the argument for, which will be that it causes confusion. So you have being gay, a sexuality, being a lesbian, which is a sexuality, and being bi, which is a sexuality, and then you have being trans, which is about your gender identity. This specific point was brought up by my dad because he feels like for cis people, for cis straight people particularly, it's confusing in that regard, because when they think of the LGBT community, they think of gay dudes. They don't think like the other parts of the acronym. That's the part that they think of first. Next up, this was put to me by a trans person, sexualization. So problems with sexualization in terms of trans people experience sexualization, obviously, because a lot of people think that like, oh, being trans is focused about sex and genitalia, because obviously a lot of trans people want bottom surgery. But being in the LGBT community, which is primarily about sexuality rather than like romantic attraction or gender identity, that's the way people view it, that contributes to the sexualization we experience. And the last one that I could think of was that we have different goals. So obviously like people like in the LGBT community, their goals revolve around having relationships with people of the same gender, and therefore their goals revolve around like stuff like marriage equality and adoption and stuff like that. Meanwhile, trans people have different goals in terms of getting equal access to transitional health care, being able to change gender recognition, being able to change gender markers on documents, getting gender recognition, being able to change names, stuff like that, making your transition easier. Those are different goals. In terms of the team that's against the split, is that number one, we have common experiences. As a trans man, I've had to come out of the closet to different people at different points of my life, and that experience, while it has been different than for a lot of LGBT cis people, it still has similarities. It's still hard to do. There's still chances of discrimination and getting kicked out and stuff like that, and not being accepted, that come along in the same kind of way as cis LGBT people experience it. In terms of, there's a lot of people now, this is personal experience but also statistical. I don't have any actual source statistics, but I've seen statistics about this before. But even in personal experience, I go to a trans youth group, and of the 30 odd people that are there on the regular, 3 of them are straight, all of which are men, and I'm one of them. So like, there is a high proportion of overlap between having an LGBT plus sexuality and being trans, and I think that amount of overlap is a big deal, especially since like I identified as like a lesbian for a while. I identified as bi for a while before I settled into being a straight trans guy. And that was just like, I was already part of a community, and I didn't feel like I had to swap teams or anything when I came out as trans. Like, I was still in the same community. I see a lot of people do that, like with the LGBT youth groups that I go to. I primarily go to the trans one, but constantly, like, people from the general LGBT youth group run by the youth service that I go to, they end up discovering that they're actually trans, and they still have another group within the same organization with like the same people, the same friends that they can go to, you know? It's a good way to build community, which leads me on to my next point, which would be strength in numbers. So like, a lot of trans people would have been quite heavily involved with the marriage equality campaign, like in Ireland at least. I definitely did my part, I would say, in terms of like trying to have discussions about marriage equality with family members that I felt might not vote yes, i.e. my granny. I managed to convince my granny, who was a very devout Catholic, to vote yes. I think that was a pretty important thing. I was definitely supportive of the equality campaign in Ireland, and I think that a lot of trans people who are straight were supportive of that as well. Yet a lot of the time, you see things happen such as cis LGBT people being like, oh yeah, when we've gotten our marriage equality, we'll get to you. And then they turn around and do something like this, where they put up a Drop the T campaign. Once they've gotten their marriage equality and they've gotten all they want from us, they try and kick us out. So while there is strength in numbers and as a larger community, if you're in the right LGBT group, you will see that kind of community. As in, belong to, the youth group that I go to, our LGBT community that we have in belong to is very strong and very accepting from both angles. Cis people support trans people support cis people. It's joined up, it's connected. Whereas you can also get problems in that regard. You can get people who are transphobic in the LGBT community. It's possible, very possible. Last but not least, I would say that historically speaking, trans people have always been at the forefront of the LGBT community in terms of Stonewall and fighting for LGBT rights, not just for trans rights, but also for the L's and the G's and the B's, you know? So it's not like trans people have been just randomly barged their way in here sometime recently. We've always been here. Lastly, I'm going to state my opinion. If you hadn't already guessed, I don't think that the trans community should split away from the LGBT community, even though it would make sense for me to want that as a straight trans person who doesn't fall into the LGB part and just the T. But I think that there is definitely a big strength in numbers. A lot of my friends, I do have cis friends who are LGB that I wouldn't have met if it wasn't for the fact that the LGBT community exists. I do have trans friends who strongly identify with LGB stuff as well, and therefore find it better that they just have one youth service that they can go to that caters to all of their identity needs. And I also think that just having a bigger community is helpful, especially with places like Belong To. Belong To is a very good service in regards to being as inclusive as it can be. However, I do think that in future that might change, and that maybe in future the trans community will split away. But if it does happen, if it's going to happen, the decision should be made by trans people, not cis people. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please click the like button down below. If you want to reply to something I've said in this video, or your opinion on the topic, the comment box is always open. And if you want to see more of my videos, you can click down there, over where the channel icon is. It's down there. And you can subscribe to me as well. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.